remember one of my seminary teachers expressing, well, skepticism isn't quite the right word, but we're going to go with that unity teachings, he wasn't sure that unity teachings could be shared with children in a way that worked for them, that made sense to them. I had some thoughts. I interjected that unity's teachings aren't really that complicated. It's grown-ups that make it so. I have so many books. And most of the so many books I have are related in some way to unity's teachings and theology. So many books. And I'm not saying that there's not value for folks, some folks, to get into the minutia and keep asking big questions and challenging and discovering. It's important work. Those people are like the physicists who are figuring out quarks and why black holes happen and all of that stuff. But, you know, most of us learn the basics of the solar system in grade school. And then as we get older, we learn more things, and we maybe learn a little bit about the physics of gravity and all those kind of things. We don't learn it all at the beginning. We kind of learn it as we go along. And I think that that's kind of how we learn about faith. We start with the basics and we get deeper. And it's good and wise to mature in our faith and ask questions and grow deeper. But it doesn't have to be complicated. And I still don't think it requires all those books I have. Oh, but I still have them, you know, because sometimes a reference. This month, there's 5 Sundays. And guess what? There's 5 Unity Basic Principles. And here they are, the 5 Unity Basic Unity's 5 Basic Principles. They are: God is, I am, I create it, I pray, I live it. See? Simple. We're going to talk more about that, of course. And I want to note that it's not like these were what Charles and Myrtle Fillmore wrote down at the beginning. That's not how it worked, right? They discovered and explored and had experiences and studied and did all those things. And then later, people put together these as the core teachings of unity from that work. And I had never even heard of them put together like this until I was in my 20s, and I grew up in unity, but I didn't disagree that these were what the core principles was. I was like, oh yeah, that's what they are. So anyway, so today's the first principle. So God is. And the more full statement, though there's several different versions of it, of course, because that's how we roll today. And that is, there is one presence. How about I say it clearly? There's one presence and one power in the universe. God, some people say God the good, omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient. We like to say lots of different words, but the main part, that's important part is there's one presence and one power in the universe. Emily Cady, one of the very first unity theologians, she's a former of our theology. She wrote in Lessons in Truth, God is not a being or a person having life, intelligence, love, power. God is that invisible, intangible, but very real something we call life. God is perfect love and infinite power. God is the total of these and the total of all good. whether manifested or unexpressed. God is perfect love and infinite power. Myrtle Fillmore wrote in How to Let God Help You, though personal to each of one of us, God is it, neither male or nor female, but principle, that's principle with a capital P. God is not a cold, senseless principle like that of mathematics, but the principle of life, love, and intelligence. Now, my mother, who's a math nerd, might disagree that mathematics is cold and senseless. I think what she likes about it is that it's clear and predictable. And that is exactly what's great about the principle of God, of principle of life and love and intelligence, is that it is clear and dependable and predictable. We'll find out if she thinks that when we get to fellowship. We, in this relative experience of life, are not used to having absolutes. We think of most things either as either or on a continuum. When we talk about the one presence in the universe, there is no opposite. Period. The power or principle of love does not have an opposite. Yes, there are people who use it unskillfully. We probably all have used love unskillfully at one time or another. Think about high school crushes. We've all used these powers unskillfully. But that doesn't mean that there's an opposite force. When we say there's one presence, God the good, we mean without an opposite. Paul Hasselbeck, who wrote the book on unity, metaphysics, and theology, it's a big one. So back to all the stuff making it more complicated than it needs to be. But some people need to hear all this stuff. So he wrote, good without an opposite. When we say divine mind or oneness is all good everywhere present, it does not mean that everything we see or experience in the relative world is good. It simply means that good underlies everything as divine ideas and is ever available regardless of the situation. And that is the super important. Not everything we experience in the relative world is good. It certainly doesn't feel good. Back to high school, less than stellar romantic experiences, right? Not everything feels good, but it does mean that good underlies everything in the divine idea. And that's the very important two parts of this story. We have the absolute realm, which is where these divine ideas are rooted. It's where we can say that it is all good because it is the spiritual realm. The spirit experiences that you and I normally have are in the relative realm. This is where the divine ideas of love and abundance and all the other things get convoluted sometimes, often, usually, through the lenses of our experiences, our hurts, our traditions, our habits, all of the stuff. And this can be the tricky bit. We like to say our affirmations from the absolute truth place. And if we can get there in our heart, that is the way to do it. I am safe in the presence of God in every situation. From the absolute perspective, from the spiritual realm, this is true. I am safe in the presence of God in every situation, because you are in the presence of God in every situation, because that's it. That's all there is. But from the perspective of anyone who's been harmed or threatened because of their skin color or their gender or their sexual orientation, or we know that our physical bodies may very well not be safe in this physical experience. So if you were to suggest an affirmation like that, you would sound clueless at best. So you may use that kind of affirmation, or you may say those things for yourself and with yourself. And that's awesome, because you understand that you're calling forth from the deepest truth. There's one presence and one power. But let's also be mindful that if we are to share those words with others who do not understand, especially that we are speaking from that point, that we want to just be mindful of our language, because it may sound like, well, we don't know what we're talking about, and we don't understand the real lived experience of people in this relative world. When I get fired up, I have to drink water. So, one presence, one power. My father-in-law, who also wrote a big theology book about unity, Glimpses of Truth, by Reverend Dr. Thomas Shepard. he calls one presence, one power OP squared, because it's kind of cute. I like to call it one power period, because that's it. That's it. That's all there is. Ooh, that's it. There are a number of ways to organize our experiences of the divine as expressed by the world's religions. Some have a pantheon of deities, usually under a head deity. Some have one God, though I might add that many of those monotheistic faith traditions also have strong evil forces. So I don't know about that. Some traditions have no deity, but practice communing with the divine, and others are anti-deity. More on that another day. But I would say that one presence, one power, omnipotent, is a step adjacent to one deity, in that there is one, but it's not separate from all that is. Or maybe more clearly, all that is part of the one deity, like all of it, all of us. Now, there are various ideas about the exact formulation of this and what that looks like, and other big questions. But I think that's getting into the quark section of the conversation, and beyond what most of us need to talk about in our day-to-day lives. I mean, we can talk about that, but we talk about that like in classes and workshops and things like that. And the cool thing, of course, is that what we teach in Unity is, that here's a bunch of ideas and concepts. These are our core ideas. And then you need to take that into your meditation time and your contemplation and your journaling and see what that means for you. It's not like you have to say, yep, that's what I believe. So, one presence, one power is like the core one. So to me, what does all that mean, right? Like, in our day-to-day life, to me, one power period means that if I'm in a suboptimal situation, or I may be feeling something, I know when I take a moment to stop feeling the suboptimal situation, I know that this is not the final answer. It doesn't mean that a hero deity is going to swoop in and solve it if I just pray right or any of that. But it does mean that I can call on my divine wisdom, love, peace, joy, imagination, etc. I can call on that for both comfort and to discover solutions, next steps, way forward. When I pause and return to knowing that there's one presence and one power, and it's here in this very space, in this very moment, no matter how suboptimal the situation, the impossible voices become less loud, and the possible gets a chance. And that, to me, is why God or spirit, or whatever you want to call it, as a principle of love, wisdom, to me is more comforting than any deity that we might pray to, because it is principle and it is consistent and it is present. God is the principle of life, love, and intelligence. It's always present where you are, where I am. And when we turn down our experience of whatever's happening in this relative physical world and tune in to the absolute world, anything is possible. You're never alone. And if you were raised with the idea that there's some, even if you were raised with, a monotheistic faith, but there's some evil force that's trying to make you behave badly, one presence and one power reminds you that there is no opposite. If you're tempted and afraid, the presence is there, unwavering. Come back. It's funny. So I said something about quarks at the beginning. And when I was writing this, I said something about I just picked something. I said quarks. Quarks is in matter. It's in everything. It's what makes up matter. So I was like, oh my gosh, quarks are like in everything. Like, God. Isn't that cute? So, if you have issues with the word God, which some people do, just say quarks. So to close our thoughts on the one presence and one power, our first principle, I'll quote Eric Butterworth and Celebrate Yourself. He says, we need to expand our thought of God to a real awareness of omnipresence, to know that the whole spirit is present in its entirety at every point in space, at the same time. To know that the whole of spirit is present in its entirety at every point in space at the same